Hello everyone. I'm Sajina Hossein Shima. I am from Bangladesh and now here I am a student of Intercultural International Communication at Royal Roads University. First, I want to acknowledge that Royal Roads University is located on the traditional lands of the Lekwungen speaking people, the Songhees, and the Esquimalt nations. With gratitude, we live, work, and learn here where the past, present, and the future of Indigenous and non-Indigenous students, faculty, and staff come together. Today, I am very excited to welcome you to this conference session that entitled Bridging the Divide, Strategies for Effective Collaboration between the Journalists and Communication Teams, presented by Iman Kashem. And let me introduce Iman Kashem is a broadcast journalist for 13 years, driven to engage and mobilize community, a queer Muslim and South Asian. Iman's family migrated to Canada in 1970 as Ugandan refugees. Iman has worked as a news reporter for Native Communication and a video journalist for APTN National News in Yorkshire, Yellowknife, and Northwest Territories. Iman also worked as an LGBTQ plus advocate to help create NWT Pride and the first Pride Festival in the territory. Iman now lives in Montreal as a video journalist for CTV News. She also currently completing an SSHRC-funded Master's in Professional Communication at Royal Roads University, researching how young Canadians decide what news to trust. So, before starting, let me clarify the session will be 45 minutes in length, and we hope to have some time for Q&A session at the end. I will go off camera for collecting and gathering your question, and at the end of the session, I'll post the question to the question for the discussion. So without any further delay, I want to welcome you all, you guys, and I am sure this session will be interesting and engaging. And now I will leave room to Iman Kashem.
Thank you so much for a wonderful introduction. Hello, everyone. I'm Iman. I'm a broadcast journalist of 13 years, and I have worked across the country doing radio and television, from in-depth stories, documentaries, to the fast-paced daily news of a big city. I've also worked in communications as a communications officer for the city of Yellowknife and the Indigenous Languages Commission of the Northwest Territories. And so along the way, I have learned how valuable that relationship between journalists and communications professionals is. It's important to have a strong, trustworthy relationship. I've been on both sides of this relationship, and all of these experiences have informed the expertise and the information that I'm going to share with you today about fostering that relationship with journalists and communication experts. But before we start, it's really important for me as a journalist to understand the history and the context in which we live. So I want to give a slightly different land acknowledgement. I'm coming at you today from Tiohtià:ke, the traditional territory of the Kanien'kehá:ka, the custodians of the lands and waters in which I live. I want to pay respect to their ancestors and honor the Indigenous people who have stewarded this land for generations. I recognize the history of colonization and oppression that has shaped our world. I stand in solidarity with the people in the lands currently facing violence and cruelty across Turtle Island, Lebanon, Gaza, Syria, Iraq, Yemen, Congo, Sudan, Pakistan, and Myanmar, among many others. I advocate for justice, equity, and healing for all, and I envision a world that prioritizes empathy and critical thinking, challenging prevailing norms and ideologies in society, ultimately cultivating a more informed and engaged citizenry for a more equitable and sustainable future. Let's share my screen. Can you all see this okay?
Yes, we can.
We can.
Wonderful. So I think the synergy between communication professionals and local journalists is a really important one. They often have overlapping goals, but approach their work from different angles. Their collaboration can be mutually beneficial for many reasons. When a communication staff trusts the journalist might be privy to exclusive information or scoops on stories. And when the journalist trusts the communication staff, their organization might be the first on a journalist call list to a related story. They might also push the news desk to cover your story. Ultimately, the collaboration between communication staffs and journalists is about leveraging each other's strengths to ensure the public receives accurate, timely, and engaging information. This synergy not only benefits both parties professionally, but it also serves the greater good by promoting informed citizenship. So I'm going to give you some tools and tips that will help communication professionals build relationships that not only serve our respective goals, but also contribute to the public discourse. We're going to talk about the newsroom. What is the newsroom and what do our days look like? How to get the attention of a journalist, how to prepare for an interview and some things to consider before you say yes to an interview, and how to be a good middle person between your organization, spokespeople, and a journalist. So today, when I talk about the news, I'm talking about 3 platforms primarily: TV, radio, and digital. And with all the budget cuts we've seen in the last few years, it is worth noting that most TV reporters are called video journalists, which is just a nice way of saying we are a one-person show. We are the camera person, the news reporter, the producer, and the editor of our stories. I file to radio, television, and the web in one day. So journalists operate on very strict deadlines, and I want to start by showing you what my typical day looks like. At 9 a.m., we have our story meeting. This is what I call the battle for stories. Either the assignment desk will assign me a story for the day, or I might pitch a story. By 9:30, I have my story, it's confirmed, and this is where I start my research and start lining up my interviews. I consider this the most important part of my day. By 11 a.m., I head to the location, sometimes 2 or 3 locations, and I will film B-roll, conduct interviews, film stand-ups, move to the next location, repeat. Sometimes there's a 3rd location, repeat. By 2 p.m., I hope to be writing my story and get it approved by editors. And I'll also take a moment to call the radio station and file for radio. By 3:30, I want to start editing together my TV package that'll go on the evening news. I edit my footage together, I voice my voiceovers, and I write a script for the web and the digital team. And then 5 o'clock is airtime. And this gives you an idea of how busy our days are. And like I said earlier, I'm a one-person team. I drive to locations, I carry my own gear, and every minute of my day matters. So getting a journalist's attention can be really hard, but here are some ways. Here are the people you would contact in a newsroom. The news desk are the people that decide the news of the day. They will decide whether a story will be covered by which journalist and which platform. Morning teams, evening teams, and weekend teams are different. So when communication teams reach out to the news desk or reach out to our tip lines, these emails go to everyone that works on the news desk. And I'm going to explain later how emails can sometimes get buried. You can also contact a journalist directly if you have a rapport with them, or it might be worth building a rapport with them. If you are an arts organization, you might want to get to know your local arts and entertainment reporters, for example. And of course, we have tip lines. This is where the general public might send us information and tips on stories. Those emails also go to the news desk. Generally, when we hear from communications professionals, it is in one of 2 ways: a press release or a media advisory. Press releases are announcements of information. They give a comprehensive overview of whatever it is you're announcing. You might include some key points, statistics, and quotes. Sometimes radio and digital will take elements of a press release to go to the web or go to air with some of these details. A media advisory is an invitation. You're inviting the media to an event. And it's also worth mentioning, in some cases, you might consider building a media kit with images, architectural plans, more background information, because if we cannot send out a reporter to your event, this would give us some visuals that someone at the news desk can work with. I'm not going to get into all of the details of press releases and media advisories because, truth be told, they're really formulaic, and I would recommend sticking to the formula. We get 1 million of these a day, so you don't need to get too creative with them. I will point out some common mistakes that I've seen in my years. In the TV world, if there are no visuals, there is no story. Important news can often get left out of a news cycle if there are no visuals or if they're visually boring. So when you're preparing your event, keep in mind how your speakers will present and how they'll be mic'd. Also, we might want to capture sound and movement. So let's take the example of like an art exhibit, an opening of an art exhibit. I might want to film the art going up on the walls, the audience's reaction to an unveiling, maybe even the whoosh of an unveiling or the wows of reactions of the audience. These are all really critical elements of a news story. And also to prepare to have cameras on site, if possible, set up your event so that journalists don't have to hike with their gear to get to the scene. Every minute of our day counts, and I'll explain later how this can work to your advantage. This one might seem obvious, but contact information. Have your media contact and on the press release that you send and on the website. Make it easy for us to get in touch with you. And when you're sending out a press release or an advisory, expect phone calls from the media and know who you will have available for interviews. This is an important one because you want the journalists to talk to the people that you need them to talk to. So back to the example of a museum exhibit, the launch of a museum exhibit, have the curator and the museum director available for interviews. This frees up time for me as a journalist to film attendees, film some beautiful B-roll, and write and edit a beautiful TV story. Because at the end of the day, we both want a really strong and compelling news story. And be mindful of a journalist's deadlines. Hold your events early. The more time a journalist has to be on the scene and to construct and develop the story, the more interviews and filming we can do. It can make a huge difference in the style and level of coverage that you get. And if your event has to be later in the day, perhaps there's a media event you can hold earlier. So beyond releases and advisories, there are other ways that you can make sure your story gets attention. Because while you might be so excited about your company launching a new thing, how you pitch your story to a journalist can make a world of a difference. First and foremost, give us a character. Give us a real life human element to a story. Another example. So let's say Royal Roads University is hosting a ribbon cutting ceremony for a new campus. As a journalist, it sounds like a bit of a soft story and a little bit of a promotion for a university. We tend to steer clear of any stories that might come off as advertisements. But if you tell me that you have a student with an incredible story that against all odds is going to be part of the first cohort and is open to speaking to the media, then I'm in, I'm hooked. Make it timely. Is there any way that you can connect your media events to a current issue? So maybe Royal Roads is opening up a new journalism campus at a time when there have been major job cuts in newsrooms. And it would be a bonus if you can prepare your spokespeople to talk about this. Okay, so you've written an award-winning press release. You have lined up spokespeople. You've given me a character, and you did everything right, but still, there are no bites. One thing you could do is follow up with a news desk. See if a journalist will cover your story or if they need additional information. If the news desk isn't interested, see if your story can be covered another day. Sometimes there's more time on the weekends to do soft news. If you send the news desk a press release on a Monday, maybe follow up on a Friday to be like, our event is tomorrow. Do you have a journalist coming out? Find a new angle. Or maybe, if you have an evening performance that is past our airtime, perhaps a journalist can show up to a dress rehearsal. Gathering your own footage is a very specific one. We don't often use other people's footage, but in some cases it is warranted. And I'll tell you a story. One day I got an early morning call from my assignment editor, and he goes, Iman, there's a local SPCA, an animal shelter. There was a flood overnight. Head to the scene. The comms person is already there. He's expecting you. It's an hour and a half away. Don't come into the station. Go right to the scene. I get there. The comms person is out there, ready for an interview. I go, okay, can we go inside? He goes, no, the building is unsafe. We can't go inside. The flood was major. I go, okay, but where are the animals? He goes, they've already been moved. We had to relocate the animals across Montreal. And so there I was in the middle of nowhere with a very undescript building in front of me. And I was in a pinch. I had no idea how I was going to get this story to air with no visuals. But the communications person and the volunteers had captured videos of the flood happening, of the animals being moved. Within my hour-and-a-half drive back to the station, they emailed them all to me, and I had footage from all these different volunteers. And look, I'll be honest, it wasn't the strongest story I ever put together, but we were able to get something to air about a story that, people really cared about.
I do not know that answer right now, but I will do everything in my power to get that information.
I hope you were able to hear that. I don't know if it worked on your end, but it pretty much sums up my experience with comm staff. Especially when a communications team is understaffed or doesn't have a media relations department. I know that some communications professionals can feel really awkward or overwhelmed about being the middle person between their organization, spokespeople, and the media. I say embrace it. Be the buffer we all need. Take the opportunity to talk to the journalist that is covering your story. Ask them the focus and the angle ahead of time so that you can line up the right person in your organization for them to talk to. And you can relay the information you get from the journalist to your spokespeople to help them prepare. Another tip a lot of communications people don't know is that comm staff can be present during interviews and record audio. I see this a lot with government officials or on topics that might be more controversial. If the journalist goes off topic, the communications person can step in and remind the journalist of the focus of the interview. If the journalist asks a question that is outside the purview of the spokesperson, the comms person can come in and say, you know what, I will get you those numbers by the end of the day. Being that buffer, that middle person, can put your spokesperson at ease, and being present is also an added piece of accountability for everyone. As a middle person, you can also have off-the-record chats with a journalist. This means that you will not be recorded or quoted. You're answering the journalist questions in order to give them context and color, because your goal is to make sure that the journalist has all the information they need in order to conduct a great interview with your spokespeople. I know that there are times when I am assigned a story that has a long and convoluted history behind it, and I don't know all the nuances. This is when I really rely on those off-the-record conversations with communication staff where I can ask questions that are geared towards my understanding and not to go to air. A seasoned journalist will know that a communications person is not necessarily the official spokesperson, but if you want to be sure, you are welcome. You can always confirm in conversation that this is off the record, because once the interview starts and you or your spokesperson is on the record, anything you say is fair game within some limits. It's fair game for the journalist to use. So before you say yes to an interview, there are some things you can consider and a number of questions that you can ask the journalist. Number one, who will I be speaking with? You can do research on the journalist and on the news outlet to see if they have written about this topic before. Is it live or pre-recorded? I'll give you more on this later. Which platform? Is it radio, TV, digital, local, or national? What is the focus or angle of the story? Who else is being interviewed? Is the journalist familiar with the story? And if not, maybe you have a fact sheet that you can share with them or suggest an off-the-record conversation to give them background. And what is the journalist's deadline? If you or your organization cannot do the interview, perhaps you can suggest an alternative spokesperson or organization that they can speak with. Okay, let's talk about live interviews versus taped interviews. There are some things to consider when you are asked to do either one of them. Live interviews have time limits that the journalist or the news anchor must stick to. This means that you can take control of the conversation and reiterate your points. And you're much less likely to be taken out of context because you have a conversation. You have whether it's 2 minutes, 5 minutes to get your points across. taped interviews will be part of a packaged news story. These are the most common news stories you see on a news show. News packages are roughly 2 minutes in length. They have 2 to 4 interviews. So let's say an official spokesperson, a local resident, and someone with an opposing or alternative view. Each person will have 1, maybe 2 clips that run anywhere from 5 to 12 seconds each. So in a taped interview, you will be reduced to a 5 to 12 second soundbite, and it is up to the journalist to decide which soundbite they will use. So you do risk being taken out of context or not being able to give full context. One benefit, though, is that if you do not give a strong answer, you can ask the journalist to repeat the question so you can try again. How do you prepare for an interview? I highly recommend media training for your organization's spokespeople, and I can recommend some names if anyone is looking, but I will also give you a quick rundown, a kind of cheat sheet on the art of interviewing. The most important part of an interview is preparing for it. Be aware of the format. Your strategies will be different. If you are doing a live interview, you're going to need to be a quick thinker. If it's pre-recorded, you can do retakes, and it'll be a different approach for digital and social media. Generate a list of 3 points that you want to address during your interview and practice articulating them succinctly. Stay on point and bring your conversation back to your key messages. And anticipate follow-up questions and prepare your responses. This is where mock interviews with communication staff and spokespeople might be really useful. Sound bites. Prepare some strong quotes because reporters love good sound bites, and there is a better chance that a good soundbite will get some airtime. You can think of a soundbite as a standalone statement. Keep your answers brief, and if you make mistakes in a pre-taped interview, just ask for a do-over. Ask the reporter to ask the question again so that you can respond again. Avoid jargon. The general audience will not know your industry lingo or acronyms. And if you use them during your beautifully practiced soundbite, it might not get used. Derailment sucks, but it's good to prepare for it, especially in a live interview. If the interviewer tries to derail the conversation, you can bring it back with phrases like, that's a really interesting point, but what's really important is, and you can address controversial questions, but pivot it back to your key messages. If you are asked a question that is based on inaccurate information, correct it succinctly and move on, end with your key messages. And you can expect unexpected questions. If you don't know the answer, it is okay to say so. You can provide information later, like numbers or statistics, and then reiterate the conversation back to your area of expertise. And this one's an important one, be authentic. We love good characters, so let your personality come through. Use stories and examples to illustrate your points because it can make you more relatable. And finally, follow up. If you promised more information during your interview, then make sure the journalist gets them before airtime. And remember, an interview is also an opportunity for the reporter or the news outlet to invite you back or become part of their in-house expert list. So following up with a thank you and an offer to be available for future interviews on your industry or in your area of expertise can go a long way. Okay, so we talked about how to get the media's attention, how to be a good middle person, ensuring the journalist is informed on the topic and preparing for an interview. But I mean, what happens if you do everything right and despite your best efforts, the story still comes out wrong or negatively? I guess it's important to know that journalists do want to get the story right. And mistakes might not be that journalist's fault. For example, headlines are rarely written by a reporter, and it may be an editor or somewhere in the process. An editor may have inadvertently made an error during the editing process. Either way, if a story comes out wrong or negative, you do have several strategies to choose from. If the information is factually inaccurate, the first step should be to contact the journalist or the news desk to let them know, because maybe it does require a correction. Stories often air more than once, and so a correction can be made for the next broadcast. And in the case of a web copy, that correction can be made even after it's posted online. Retractions are rare. This is when a story will get removed completely. They're rare, but they do happen. It is important to provide clear factual evidence of the error. And most media outlets do have policies in place for making corrections.
Tashim, I would like to warn you that we have to go the question session after 5 minutes. So we still have 5 minutes for the session. If you want, we can do our question session at the end of the session. So I just wanted you to know that.
Okay, so power through the rest. Okay, use your own channels, leverage your own channels, your social media, your website to put out a message of your own. Keep an eye on how the story develops in other media channels. It'll give you an understanding of what the public perception is and if you need to do any more mitigation on your part. Media training, I already talked about it. I think media training is great. Building relationships with journalists can give you the benefit of the doubt in future interactions and it'll make it easier to navigate these situations. Legal action, it's a last resort. I almost did not include this one. It is something that you can consider, but I would say leave it as a last resort because for so many reasons, the relationship between comms teams and journalists is an important one. So why does this relationship matter? Why does it matter so much that I have constructed an entire presentation around it? Communication teams want to distribute information about their organization. Journalists are always looking for interesting and newsworthy stories. Working together can ensure that timely, accurate, important information is shared with a bigger audience. A strong collaboration can also make sure that the information being reported about your organization is accurate. It can help prevent misinformation and maintain the organization's reputation. And for journalists, on their part, they have a reliable source to verify facts, which enhances their own credibility. In times of crisis management, this relationship becomes crucial. Organizations need to communicate effectively and transparently to manage and mitigate the situation. And journalists, in turn, they want accurate, up-to-date information and to report to the public. A strong working relationship can facilitate this process. If there is one thing I have learned from my peers in the MAPC program is that communication professionals have access to unique stories and insights that can be incredibly valuable data to journalists. By providing journalists with access to this content, communication staff can help shape their narrative, can help shape a narrative around their story and in their organization in a positive light. Building these relationships can also lead to great professional growth opportunities for communication staff. Understanding the needs of journalists can improve the effectiveness in how you pitch stories and how you manage media relations. And for journalists, connections with communications professionals can provide a steady stream of story ideas and expert sources. So to wrap up, I want to underscore the profound impact that a strong relationship between communication professionals and journalists can have, not just for our individual organizations, but on society as a whole. We have the power to elevate the quality of information given to the public and ensure that it is both accurate and engaging. This partnership is about building a foundation of trust, respect, and mutual understanding. As we navigate the complexities of the digital age where information is both abundant and fleeting, the importance of these relationships becomes even more crucial. As communication professionals and journalists, we are gatekeepers of stories. We are also storytellers, and we each play a pivotal role in shaping the narrative and informing the public discourse. By working together, we not only enhance our respective practices, but we also contribute to a more informed, engaged, and empowered society. Because remember, at the heart of collaboration is a shared goal of serving the public interest. By embracing the principles of transparency, accuracy, and empathy, we can create a media landscape that not only informs, but inspires. I feel like I really powered through that last 5 minutes, but thank you so much for your attention. Thank you so much to Royal Rose for having me. I would really love if you have any questions, please you can
Thank
share
you,
them with me now.
Kashim, for the conversation, the information that you have just gave us is, I think that's so important and very good to know how you handle in the time of is a very serious job, I think, to maintain the communication. And I am seeing that people have so many questions for you. So if you allow me, I can one by one tell them. And I people likes to know very certain things. Like one of my friend asked me, like, well, after pitching a story by email, is a phone call follow up the next morning appropriate?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
And he is asking that Andrew Walker, I guess, after pitching a story by email, is a phone call follow up the next morning is appropriate?
Oh, sure. I mean, it really depends the timeline of the story. You as a communications professional, do you need the story to be covered? Make it timely. Newsrooms operate really quickly, but also we're very tunnel visioned on the news of the day. So if you send a press release on a Monday that's inviting us to an event on a Saturday, follow up closer to the weekend. It would be the weekend team that would be in charge of that. So follow up a little bit later in the week. If you send me a press release on a Monday and you need me to show up for Tuesday, then yeah, call. Yeah, follow up quickly.
It is a very good answer. And another friend of mine is asked, she has a question regarding the treatment of the sources, especially when your organization works for the GBV survivors. So what do you think about that? Uh, hello,
Yeah,
can you hear me?
critical information.
It's like I have she asked for regarding the treatment of the sources
Yeah.
of the information, especially when your organization works for with the GBV survivors.
Yeah, I think, we do use anonymous sources, especially in cases like this. These are conversations you have with the journalist has with their editors, news director, their news desk. But yes, anonymous sources, we do use them. We don't use them all the time, but there are cases in which for sure we would conduct interviews anonymously.
Another interesting question that I have for you. One of our friend, Beth, he's, am I pronouncing it right or not? I don't know. Please apologize. He asked for the saying nothing is off record, and I have found this can be often to be the case. Do you think we can always trust journalists to respect an off the record conversation?
I mean, I would say yes. If a journalist tells you a conversation is off the record, it is off the record. It would be very, very unethical for a journalist to be recording you when you have confirmed a conversation is off the record. In my experience, I've worked in so many newsrooms across the country, and that is something I feel like I can say, and I've never met a journalist that would breach that. Off the record conversations are very valuable for both of us. Someone here asks, do people still hold news conferences? Yeah, totally. Every day, all the time. We go to a ton of news conferences, whether they're government, public health, local organizations. An organization would generally do a press conference for a bigger announcement. What kind of news does it take to get me to one? Breaking news, big news. And if it's not breaking news, like I said earlier, give us a character, give us a good story to tell from the perspective of a human being, a real life human doing something.
Would you advise spokesperson to address the most difficult issue right up front, even if it's not asked? Is a question for Beth Hist as well.
I don't understand the question. I'm trying to read through them myself too.
Would you advise spokesperson to address the most difficult issue right up front, even if it's not asked? Like, I think he's asking for if
I
anything
think so.
uncomfortable comes up. Yes.
Yeah, I think so. In my experience, journalists are really, I don't know, fact-oriented. black and white, very little thinkers. Just get it out there. If you have something difficult to talk about, yeah, you can lead with the hard news first. Go for it.
And I think this story comes up in the situation is all about how we communicate and resolve the situation. I think as a job, it's very challenging to sense what's coming in front of us and kind of control this. That's what I am guessing right now. And it's a very important, I think. To my perspective, it's very important to understand what's really going on as a journalist and how to communicate appropriately with respect.
Yeah, I agree with you. And there's another great question here on their perspective and guidelines at the news desk and how they make decisions on what story goes to air, what language is used, which people getting interviewed. It's a very good question. It's a complicated one. But when it comes to deciding the news of the day, even if I often go to bat with a news team of like, no, I want to cover this story. It's a great story. And they fight back. And we do go head to head to decide whether a story is the news of the day. Ultimately, it is up to the news desk and your news director to decide what makes the news and when. Now, when I am assigned a story, who I talk to, if I'm doing a story on avocados, I don't know why that came to mind. If I decide to talk to children about how they like avocados, or I want to talk to nutritionists, that would kind of be up to me. And I would work with my news desk if necessary to figure out what angle or what characters. But I do have a lot of that autonomy as a journalist to decide how I want to talk about that story. It is also part of this question here in how we make decisions. Journalism isn't governed in Canada across one big policy of how we deal with stories, how we talk about stories, how we deal with misinformation. It is up to each newsroom, and they have their own policies in place, and they differ across platforms, across outlets.
One question I would like to ask you about the resource. Like you have shown us a timeline how news room works, like the timetable 9, the meeting 11. Like you were going through a process before finally it comes to air, like broadcast. So if in the middle of the process you find some information can be uncomfortable, can raise question, can be cause of conflict, maybe some validity issue. So how do you handle that during the process, the information?
Also, such a good question. It really depends. I've worked for APTN where I did longer form journalism. And if something came up, a snag came up along the way, they would put the brakes. Wait, let's wait till the family is more comfortable to speak to us. Let's wait until we can talk to lawyers. Let's wait. In a faster news environment, I really rely on my editors and my news director to help me make the strongest ethical decision on how the story will go to air. For sure, snags happen along the way every day in the newsroom. Sources fall through. Communications people come down with a cold and we can't do the story we wanted to that day. Tons of things happen and we just roll with the punches. I think our goal is to make sure we get a strong, accurate, factual story that represents the community. That's my goal, and I think that's hopefully a lot of journalists' goals. I don't know if I can speak for all journalists, but how we navigate these interruptions along our day are gonna differ. But as a communications person, you can check in with the journalist to be like, where are you with this?
So I also like to, how does you're in the social media is very active right now. People can post, people can share the news, and how do you find it very conflicting? Because as a journalist, I think it's a kind of responsibility to get the right news, but due to the social media and everything, and news spreads more than I think it's super fast right now. Before you realize it's out there. So
It's
how
so fast. News moves so fast. And sometimes I wonder why? Why do we need 24 hours of news? This is wild. But, I would love to see a future where traditional mainstream journalism can work more harmoniously with online social media influencers and citizen journalism. I think citizen journalism is the future. It's what brought me back to school. It's why I'm doing my master's right now, is on how Gen Z Canadians determine what to trust and what they find credible in the news. I think
It's very relatable.
it's so interesting. I don't think trust in the news is disappearing. I think it is finding a new form. Trust is malleable. It can be ruptured. It can be repaired, and understanding where young people are placing their trust. Maybe we can create a media landscape that can meet their needs in the future. I think there's also a lot of incredible citizen journalism and online journalism that exposes a lot of truth, a lot of misinformation. For as much as much misinformation there is online, there's also a ton of great information online. And I think, it comes down to digital literacy, which is something we are also lacking.
Another friend of mine just asked, what is the best way to start a relationship with a journalist? It's a very interesting question, I guess.
Yeah, look, journalists want to be your friend. We want you to know us. We want you to have our phone number. So it won't be hard. If you are a communications person for an arts organization, find your local arts and entertainment reporters, monitor the news, find the channels, the platforms that you love the most and that you like, and start reaching out to them. Follow them on LinkedIn, follow them on social media, pop them messages. It won't be hard to bridge that gap, to bridge that relationship. It can start with a simple email. Hey, I'm so-and-so. I'm the comms person for this organization. I'd really like to get to know you and tell you a bit more of the organization.
Thank you, Iman. This conversation and this session is very useful for many people, I guess. It's also useful. I find it very valuable for me because I am also studying communication, and I also think it's important to know how to react in the practical situations. So that was very useful for me, and I love how you present with the timeline, with the PowerPoint, everything, and it's very useful for many of us. And thank you so much for having this session with us. Anything you want to say to our guest, or before wrapping up the whole thing?
I'd really like to say, look, journalists and communications professionals, we are cut from the same cloth. We do the same job in different ways. We answer to different organizations, but our motives are very similar. In my line of work, I still remember the names and the positions of the communication staff that have helped me the most along the way. Yeah, I think it's so important to build and foster these relationships as communication teams get smaller and smaller. I know that there are comms people that are wildly understaffed. Same goes for newsrooms. We can rely on each other much more than we do. Someone also asked if I have a cool story from my time at ABTN, and I would say if you Google my name plus Inuit tattoo revitalization project, that was probably the coolest story I ever did. I spent a month in the high Arctic in two communities called Uluhaktak and Tuktayaktuk, following a group of women that were bringing back traditional Inuit facial tattoos. And it was probably one of the most moving stories I've ever worked on.
Thank you so much, Iman Kashim, for your wonderful information. I think everyone enjoys this session a lot. And I hope to see you again and in some other conference and get some more fabulous information. And thank you so much to be here. So
thank you so much. Please everyone, reach out to me. I saw that there are more questions I wasn't able to get. So here you go. Here's information.
We still have 1 minute. If you want to say something, you can take this time. We have still 1 minute left. You can take any question you want, and everybody is kind of happy to have you. So
what else? I'm trying to scroll through the questions here.
Say that they are seen your story, and it's a very nice.
Who are my journalist mentors and role models? Oh my goodness, so many. I don't know.
It's a really good question.
Yeah, there are so many. Where would I even start? I'm a huge fan of CBC. I really love a lot of these journalists. I love Omar Sachedina, Lisa Laflamme. I can't. I feel like I'm on the spot now. I can't even think. I'm gonna, as soon as this ends, I'm gonna be like, oh, how did I forget my mentors?
It's,
Yeah,
it's
okay, maybe
good
we
to
did.
know.
Maybe
Good
we
to
did
know.
get it.
Okay, guys, we have email and LinkedIn in the end of the session. We'll provide the link of Iman Kashim. If you want to contact her and get some more information, you're always welcome. And thank you, Iman, to be here. And it's a wonderful experience with you. I hope see you soon. So I'm gonna wrap this up, and our next session will be at 1 p.m. It's about the art of an ethical course presented by John Adams. So I hope see you guys on that session. So till then, have a good day. Thank you so much. Thank you, Iman Kashim. Bye.